Blumhouse is 20 years old. Well, not quite 20 years old. It was 2007. The first Paranormal Activity hit screens, and it was a phenomenon. And I think that's sort of where Blumhouse became known as the go-to place for horror for quite a while. And here we are in 2026, so we're a little shy of the 20th anniversary, but tons of franchises. We got a new Insidious right around the corner. Paranormal Activity is hitting stages across the world. It's actually literally in theaters. So I think the impact of Blumhouse has been felt everywhere. And so we decided now is a great time to talk about our top Blumhouse, the best of Blumhouse. So I'm Chris Vanderkay, and I am, who knows what I am? An actor, writer, filmmaker, film curator. And with me today is one of my co-filmmakers, Stephen Espinoza, who, Stephen, now that you have directed a horror film, obviously you are the exact person to speak to about this, because you've not only been a horror fan I don't know about your entire life, but most of your life, but now you've also made one. So I feel like that
Yeah.
puts you in the
Now I'm an
pantheon.
expert. I'm an expert at this now. So
Exactly. Listen, there's people with a lot less experience than us that are claiming to be experts in all kinds of arenas. So why not go ahead and just grab it until someone calls us on it?
exactly. Yeah. I
All
can
right. So
go on
yeah.
and
So
on about
basically,
that right now, but I'm just
what's
gonna
that?
abstain. I can go on and on about frauds doing things that they shouldn't be doing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we'll keep this all horror.
Yeah, exactly. That's another conversation for another day, which could go
Yeah.
on considerably longer than this one. So today, what we're going to do, we wanted to talk about what we like, what was the best of Blumhouse. I think sometimes there's a reputation that Blumhouse has had in recent years about them being PG-13 horror, or them being, like, which personally I don't have an issue with, because everybody needs gateway horror. You don't always start straight with, you don't make a 9-year-old watch Cannibal Holocaust. You let them build up to it. So you need PG-13 horrors, but also I think that they've done some really fantastic movies, and so I thought it would be fun to go through the last 19 years of Blumhouse filmmaking, and we could each pick our 5 favorites. Now, a couple of rules before we dive in for anybody watching. You just want to know. First, we are focused only on Blumhouse horror for this list. So, because Blumhouse has made a lot of movies that don't fall into that category. So, we're not talking Black Klansman, we're not talking about Whiplash, although they're great movies. We're not talking about The Tooth Fairy, starring Dwayne The Rock Johnson, which is a horror of an entirely different kind. So, yeah, so we're sticking to horror specifically. I also want to mention we have not seen each other's lists. We pick separately, so we don't know what's on each other's lists. And the only rule that comes from that, aside from react honestly when you hear the choice, is if I mention one at my number 5 and Steven has it at like his number 3 or 2, he just says I have it higher on my list, and then we wait, and then we'll both talk about it at the point that it comes up. I have a sneaking suspicion that Steven and I are probably not going to have a bunch of overlap, though. We'll see how that goes.
That's
And
gonna
then
be up to you, man. That is gonna be up to you.
Well, I
Because
was going to
I
say, I
think
think I think if anybody doesn't know what our tastes are, they will quickly become clear based on the choices that we've picked for this list. And then the last thing that we wanted to mention, because we decided we wanted to pick 5 titles of our own that are of interest to us, what we think are the best, but we also agreed on an honorary joint number 1, even though we technically each have a list of 5 to 1. We decided on having an honorary joint number 1 because it has been scientifically proven to be the scariest movie of all time. We are making Sinister the honorary joint number 1 for Blumhouse. Did you see? I'm curious what your experience was with Sinister. Did you see it in theaters, or did you catch up with it later?
I did. I actually saw it with my friend at the time. She hates horror movies, and we were both. I mean, she's a chicken shit, but I was acting just as chicken shit as she was. Like, it was honestly one of the most gobsmacking, like, scary movies I've seen. And of course, that came out in 2012, the year after The Conjuring, and I just felt like, as horror fans, we started really eating up. Like, those two films seemingly springboarded like a new era of like jump scare horror, where like they really emphasized that over, before that it was the torture porn era of horror. I think those two films, specifically Sinister, kind of ushered in like this jump scare era of horror that we're kind of see fade away now, but it's still prevalent.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, interestingly, the two that you mentioned, Vera Farmiga was in one and Ethan Hawke was in another. Also an era of lower budget horror films, but that also still had sort of the patina of like classiness to them, in the way that eras before that, like, you weren't going to see big stars in a lot of horror films unless they were like tentpole horror movies. You know what I mean? Like big, like M. Night Shyamalan level stuff, you know? But like, I
Yeah.
think Sinister was only a few million, you know? Like, I know Insidious, I think, I want to say the first Conjuring was higher than like Insidious, but it was like 20 million. And Sinister, I think maybe was 10, something like that. Anyway, not a huge amount of money, but with bankable known stars, you know, in central performances, giving really good performances. So yeah, that was something that set them apart as well.
Yeah, I would have definitely had Sinister in my top five. It would probably be number two if we didn't rule it out altogether, which meant I had to dig slightly deeper in my bag, even though my five are still sort of mainstream, probably compared to yours. But yeah, I think we're ready to go off that.
Yeah, for sure. And also, just so in case anybody doesn't know what we're talking about when I say scientifically proven scariest movie, scientists actually did tests where they showed people a series of scary movies, ones that have been credited with being scary, and they used like I don't remember what it was, brain mapping or something like that, where they were like doing brain scans of the way that you react in real time, and that was the one that scored highest in terms of the way that the human brain reacted in terror to watching it. So that's what we meant by saying scientifically proven. So all right, so now the time has come. We're ready to dive in. We're gonna start with five and work our way to one. And Stephen, because you are the guest, I'm going to allow you to start with your number five, and then we'll just move from there.
All right. So my number five pick is actually a sequel film from Blumhouse. I could have very easily picked the first one because I love the first one, and in many ways, if not every way, it is the better film, but it's not my favorite of the franchise, and that is Insidious Chapter 2. I freaking
Well,
love Insidious Chapter 2.
well, you and me both, because I have it maybe a couple steps higher than you. So we'll put a pin in it because I think you and I are probably gonna have a ton to talk about with this one because it made my list too. Frankly, higher than it made it on yours even. So
Look at that. Yeah, I thought you
yeah.
said we weren't going to have some,
I
and
didn't
here we
think,
go.
I'll be honest, I didn't think that was going to be on your list for reasons that I will list when we talk about it. Yeah, no, it was a surprise to me because I think you tend to like stuff that more people like than me. And I didn't think that many people liked chapter two as much as one. So, but maybe we'll come to a consensus on why it is, and maybe it's a completely different consensus for why we both like it.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, here. So I'm going to give you my number five, which I can almost guarantee will not be on your list. So there
Okay.
won't. I think there won't be much overlap from here. So the number five I picked, I wanted it on this list because I really enjoy the movie. It is not by any means a perfect movie, but it's really interesting. It takes some big swings, and it did not get a lot of love in most ways. It didn't get a lot of love in the sense that there was a lot of public backlash about it. In fact, public backlash that caused the release of it to get sort of scuttled, and it ended up coming out in a different way than it was intended. And it was also not critically super well received, but it had what I think is a pretty great satirical screenplay by Lost writer Damon Lindelof, and it was directed by compliance director Craig Zobel. I am referring to The Hunt. For anyone who hasn't seen it, and I think the unfortunate reality is there's a lot of people who haven't seen it because it was supposed to come out in theaters. Then there was a lot of backlash because the movie was purportedly about a bunch of liberals that are killing off conservative people, and it was like a, you know, Hunger Games but political. That is not exactly what it is, but anyway, it ended up getting pulled from theaters, and then it got a smaller release later where it was like quiet, and they hoped nobody would get upset about it because you know that's how politics works. If you're quiet about it, nobody will ever get upset. But it's one of the few Blumhouse movies I can think of that is as much a satire as it is a horror film. Like it really does balance, I think, both of those pieces equally. And for me, the most important takeaway of the movie is, were she not already well known, this would be a star-making performance from Betty Gilpin. It is a monster of a performance. She is so good in this. In one of those ways where, like, if you saw that performance, you can sometimes think a movie is better if you get a role like that out of it. Like you can, in retrospect, think a movie is actually better because of how good she was in it. But so that's my number five pick is The Hunt.
The Hunt, man, you told me to watch it. I think I watched it about a year or two after you told me to, but it blew me away. Like the whole premise, like I really don't understand the whole controversy around it. I felt like it was pretty tame compared to the uproar that it was like being said about it. The advertising for that movie, just I love it so much. Like all of like the Republican quotes like on the poster of like this is why the country is the way that it is, like just trying to divide the country, so on and so forth. It's funny
Yeah.
because one of my friends who's Republican, he loved the movie. You know, like he really dug it. Like he didn't feel like it was a personal attack on his, you know, on his political beliefs, and he just enjoyed it for what it was and how ingenious it sort of is, and the commentary that it's saying, and just really like it does the commentary in a way where it's not just shoving it down your throat. It's, giving it to you on a nice violent palate that you
Hmm.
can sort of eat up. And it's just a romp. Films that balance that kind of violence with humor, I always tend to enjoy. And when it's coming from Lindelof, like it's,
Yeah.
you just buy in completely.
Well, and he did something in this, I think, something they planned to do in Lost and didn't get to do. I don't know if you knew about this, but originally they were going to make Lost. The main character of Jack was going to die at the end of the pilot, and they were going to have a big star. They had actually cast Michael Keaton, and he was going to be Jack. And the big deal was going to be Michael Keaton's first television series, and he was going to do all the press and everything. And then his character was going to die in the end of the first episode, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh my god, the big star that was going to be headlining this thing, he's dead. What does the show become now?" Well, obviously they didn't get to do that because ABC's not going to foot the bill for him and then like kill him off. But they kind of did a similar thing in this, in that most of the material you'll see for the ads come from the first 15 minutes of this film
Yeah.
with some big names. Emma Roberts, Justin Hartley from This Is Us, a couple of other people you really know are as big names. And then the movie completely does a rug pull from you at about the 15-minute mark. And it's just like chef's kiss brilliant the way that they did it. I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, dude, and just the inventiveness of the set pieces, like that opening sequence, like you said, and just the different kills throughout. Like it just brought that giddy joy in me that you're just watching something that's totally unhinged in a way that a lot of filmmakers are scared to do. Not scared to do, but a lot of filmmakers try to do it and they just can't strike the balance in tone the way that Zobel did for this one.
Yeah, 100% agree. Well, so that's my number 5. So, and while you enjoyed it, it definitely didn't make your list. So maybe we're not going to have too much overlap from here, but let's see.
Whether or not you put this on your list, I don't know, but I know that you do love this film and you do love this filmmaker. And this is one of those movies that sort of dropped off the face of the earth for a little bit and made a resurgence on physical after staying away for a while. And I think it was one of Netflix's first sort of originals or, acquisitions. And that is Hush by Sir Mike Flanagan.
Michael Flanagan. So,
Yeah.
you know what? I was entirely wrong about the fact that we weren't going to have any overlap. Because yes, we do. That one does pop up later in my list as well. The good news is, I swear to God, you will actually be able to talk about the movies that you like because we're going to be getting to them. It just turns out what's going to end up happening is the ones that made the bottom of your list are at the top of mine, and we're going to talk about all the crap that you didn't bother putting on your list first.
That works for me, man.
But yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, put a pin in Hush, but there is a ton to talk about that one. I think the careers of the actors involved and blah blah blah. So, but yes, fantastic. All right, so your number 4 was Hush, and we will get back to that in a minute. Now, my number 4, you talked about a sequel that you enjoyed more than the original. I am now going to talk about a sequel I enjoyed more than the original. It's one of 3 on my list that are actually sequels that I enjoyed more than the original film, all 3 from different franchises. I think you like this one too. I don't know if you liked it as much as me. We'll see if it made your list. It comes from the franchise that essentially birthed Blumhouse. It is one of the Paranormal Activity films. It is an interesting entry because you would think it would be the one that would be able to be the least innovative because of the time that it is set in, but it ended up being in some ways the most innovative of the entries. It is made by filmmakers who had no experience making horror films or narrative films of any kind. They were documentary directors who made Catfish before they made this. I'm talking about Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman's Paranormal Activity 3. Is that on your list?
It's not on my list, and I can't say that I'm like a crazy big fan of the Paranormal series. I love 1. I've seen the first 4. And of the 4, I love the first one the most, but I do love the third one. And I actually did watch the third one in theaters, and I was scared shitless on that one, and I really enjoyed it. I don't remember a lot of it, but I can tell you that in the moment when I did watch it, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So there are 3 Paranormal Activity movies that I like. I mean, I enjoy all of them. I've watched the whole series, except for Ghost Dimension, which I tell everybody to avoid. But all the rest of them I like. But there are 3 that I really like. The first one, the third one, and the marked ones. Those are the ones that I really enjoy. The third one for me, though, it's the high water mark of the series because it does a few things. First of all, the first one is really solid. The second one, it feels, while it's well made, it feels like a weird addendum to a previous project as opposed to its own thing. What I thought the third did really effectively is it married both of those together with a shared previous narrative that made both of those make more sense in retrospect, which is a difficult thing to do with a prequel that doesn't also, like they say, when you go back and you learn where Hannibal or Darth Vader came from, it's not as powerful anymore. I don't feel like that happened with Paranormal Activity 3. If anything, it deepened the interest I had in the characters of Katie and the other characters that we met. And then the other thing I loved was the innovation that they came up with to come up with scares that were era appropriate. My favorite one being the jerry-rigged oscillating fan camera that just slowly turns back and forth. And one of the reasons I felt like that was such a genius innovation is because the speed with which it moved. It's so slow that it automatically builds tension, because what they realized was if the fan turns this slow and then holds, everybody's had one of those oscillating fans where it holds like this for
Yeah.
2 seconds before turning back. It means you've got a 7-second journey. So if you saw something when the camera was here, it means you've got 7 seconds of just impatient waiting before it gets back to that spot and you see what transpired in that spot. And that is such a genius use of in-world mechanics to create a scare where otherwise there wouldn't have been one. If a camera was just static and pointed at something, that scare would not have worked. So that was a great effect. I love the backstory. This is really where I think the lore started to kick in, even past like whatever the entity was. It started to hint at the idea that there was a larger scope. There was maybe the mother was involved in some sort of like a coven and stuff like that. And I really liked that the two main guys in the movie were videographers that did like wedding videography, because it was the 80s
Yeah.
and they needed a way to explain why are these guys shooting stuff all the time. So rather than just like ignore it, they were like, well, let's create a reality for them where it makes sense that they're doing this all the time. So yeah, I just thought it was surprisingly well thought out for a third entry in a series that you would imagine was already of limited means, because it was like a found footage single house haunted story, and I thought it was really inventive.
It's one of those that I think I'm going to have to go back and revisit. It's been such a long time since I watched it, whenever it came out in cinema. And
Yeah.
it just now, with the newfound appreciation and love for found footage, since you've shown me the light within the last, four or so years here, I feel like I need to go back and take a deeper look into paranormal and some of the other sort of found footage movies of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. I think it's worth going through to see all of them, just because, first of all, it finishes out the narrative. But like I said, 1, 3, and marked ones are all movies that I think are worth revisiting or watching if you haven't seen them. So, but yeah, so that is my number 4. And now we move on to your number 3.
All right. So my number 3 is the most popular movie of 2026. Well, I guess up until Spider-Man just took the throne. And that is Curry Barker's Obsession. So there could be some recency bias to this. There could be some Curry Barker fanboyness to this, because I liked his first film and I liked his short form stuff. I think he's really funny and has just a keen sense of sort of meshing horror and comedy together. But I really dug this movie, even though there's just so many thoughts about this movie out in social media. Mm-hmm. Everyone has their opinions on it. It just pops up literally 1 out of every 10 reels is just somebody talking about how Bear is the bad guy of the movie. Like, we know, we get it. But man, it's such a, like, for the budget, obviously that's been discussed a lot. But just for like a first true like theatrical feature for Barker, obviously he did Milk and Cereal, which is found footage. But for a first traditional feature film, it looks so good. And he has such a good control of the camera. And he really just milks sort of like the wide shots where she's in silhouette, or just like kind of echoing Ari Aster's sort of cinematography. Like, a lot of people might look at Obsession and be like, oh, he's just biting, Midsommar or Hereditary, and he's just reusing some of the stuff we've seen in that. But dude, like, you reuse it and people borrow stuff and people get inspired by filmmakers for a reason, because it's good shit, man.
Well, plus he's doing a different thing with the tone too. Like, he's not. I think no one would argue that Ari Aster's first couple of films are pretty dour. They're pretty straightforward, dark stuff.
Oh.
I don't think the same can be said of Obsession, and so I think he's playing with the same visual language, but doing it for, I think, entirely different results and purposes.
Yeah, and he utilizes the audience's sort of like. It's a movie definitely for the social media age. Like, not everybody has been in a toxic relationship before, but you sort of, you have your friends or families, maybe you've seen it before in real life. You can sort of compare that, like being trapped in a relationship, sort of how Nikki was in the film, like being trapped in the body, and just like the overtly cutesy sort of like the outcries of Nikki, you know, the attention getting. Like everyone has seen that. It's like it's a movie for the people. Everyone's seen that, whether it's a friend, you know, I've had friends that did that. I knew people from like high school who were in that sort of way. So it kind of just brought up these broad memories of like, yeah, everyone knows a Nikki, you know, and everyone knows a Bear. So it kind of felt relatable. It kind of felt like the movie was really talking to me, even though I wasn't, like, I was never in a toxic relationship and I never would do anything of the sort within the movie, but it still kind of resonated with me in that way. And really it goes back to like the direction as well, like just balancing like the horror, the laughs, the humor, knowing when to like put the brakes on, you know, like they could have really sort of milked it and maybe perved it out a little bit more if they wanted to, but they sort of knew how to walk the tightrope to make sure that it was, you know, it led to a satisfying conclusion. And God, the possibilities are endless with the plot, really. Like it's one of those movies that you watch, you're like, I wish I thought of that. I feel sick to my stomach that I didn't think of this idea. It's like very simply executable. And it goes back to that thing that Spielberg said one time where it's like, if you can describe a movie in 25 words or less, you're going to have a hit most of the time.
Well, and he did something else I think is really interesting. I haven't heard a ton of people talk about it, and it might be maybe because you know I'm like over 10 years older than you. I'm like 12 years older than you, so I come from a slightly different generation. And one of the interesting takeaways for me while watching Obsession is whether Curry Barker was doing it unconsciously because he's part of a generation, or whether he's aware of it and pointing it out. So much of the movie is about people's discomfort with public displays of emotion. How uncomfortable everyone is when someone in the room seems genuinely emotionally affected by something, and how everybody backs away from it. Like deeply uncomfortable. Not just in the scenes where Nikki was overreacting because she's, you know, trapped inside of this false version of her, but even at the beginning when Bear was attempting to be genuine in his practice run of how to confess, and his friends were humiliated on his behalf for just being genuine. Like there's something really interesting that movie is saying about the idea of what does it mean generationally that so many of us want to like pull back and be revolted by the idea of someone being open and feeling something in front of other people. And I thought that was so perfectly captured in the movie.
Yeah, and even aside from like the generational disconnect, it almost feels like in a post-COVID world, it's just sort of amplified a little bit too, because during, you know, like the quarantine stage where everything was just sort of like an arm's length away, you know, your 6 feet of separation, or your Zoom birthdays instead of going up to people and stuff like that. Like that sort of physical disconnect sort of manifesting itself through cinema now, where it's like the cringe humor of, you know, Obsession or Nathan Fielder's stuff out in the world. Like that's sort of like resonating with modern audiences in ways that I don't think would have worked as well in the past. Not to say that there wasn't awkward, weird humor in the past, but it just feels like that is now the mainstream. Like that's the mainstream comedy is now weird, awkward comedy. You know, Fielder, Robinson, you know, some of what Barker's doing here is just uncomfortable, good comedy, weird horror.
No, that's a really good point. And I think there's probably a vein of that a little bit in Milk and Cereal. And I don't want to spoil what that one's about and where it goes, but I do think there is a similar thread to be had in there with like what the audience knows versus what the character knows, and how that creates a weird sense of discomfort as well. So yeah, that might be something that like, I know Barker's just finished shooting his next project, and that's, you know, his next theatrical release. So I'm interested to see if this is a recurrent theme for him, you know, if it's something he's noticed or just something that's unconscious in his work. But no, that's a great pick.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm almost certainly going to be the most recent film on the list, I would have to imagine. All right, so it's time for my number 3. We finally get to revisit the one that you brought up early on. My number 3 is James Wan and Lee Whannell's Insidious Chapter 2. So since you brought it up first, I'll let you start with talking about Insidious Chapter 2. Why was this one A, on your list, and B, why instead of, or in addition to Insidious Chapter 1?
So I'm very excited to talk about this one because just aside from it being such a fun movie, a lot of the times experiences shape the way you look at a movie. And my movie watching experience for Chapter 2 was one of the best experiences of my movie going life, which is shocking because it's just such a random
Hmm.
niche. I think it dropped like in January of 2020 or 2013. But at the time, I was working at Regal Cinema, the one at Waterford Lakes that we used to go to. And so me and my friend, we both worked there and we both got off at the same time and we got free tickets to go watch movies. So after a shift, we're just like, let's go watch Insidious Chapter 2. Like, we like the first one. Why not watch this one? So right off the shift, we went straight to the theater and it was just us. Nobody else was in the theater. No one else ended up walking in. You know, sometimes you think you have the theater to yourself and someone kills it in the last second. But we had the theater to ourselves the entire time, which allowed us to almost in real time, like kind of go through it in a way that we couldn't have if we had a full audience. You know, we were screaming at the screen, we were screaming in terror, we were talking about holy shit, I can't believe that we're actually getting like a time travel movie disguised as a haunted house movie. So we were kind of going through all that. I hadn't watched like the trailer. I hadn't religiously been watching the trailer. I think I saw it maybe one time. And it was just a different landscape media wise back then where you weren't inundated with reaction videos or, you know, influencers telling you to go watch a movie and how cool it is and breakdowns and reaction videos. It was just pure, went in purely blind, and what I got was not what I was expecting.
Hmm. Well, it's perfect that you brought up, and yes, I guess technically it could be considered a spoiler to say that it was a time travel movie. But the reason that I love Insidious Chapter Two so much is because it reminds me so much of Back to the Future Two. In it does one of the same things that Back to the Future Two did. It built on the concept of the first one, but it also went back and recontextualized whole passages of the first movie and made them mean something different if you watched the first movie again, knowing now what this second film has said about it. And I don't just mean like character motivation, I mean literally participating in events that happened in the first film in a way that you could not possibly have known because they hadn't happened yet. And it genuinely makes me wonder, like, did James Wan and Lee Wanell think, we feel like this is going to be a big enough hit that we're going to get another one, so let's plan these moments? Or did they, after it was made, go, we have an amazing opportunity, let's mine this first one and see what we can allude back to? I don't know which it is, but either way, it's genius writing and film construction. And it's so funny to me because I've not heard a ton of people talk about this entry specifically. I've heard them talk about Insidious, the first movie, and then the franchise generally. But I love this film, and I generally tend to find I am one of very few people that loves Back to the Future 2 as much as the first one. Most people think that that was like a step down, it was too complicated, it was too dark. I think all of those things can also be said about Insidious Chapter 2, but those are all the things I like about it. I like when it gets like weird and complicated and like a little bit further ahead of you than it should be, and you kind of got to keep up, like all that kind of stuff. I love that. It means I have repeat viewability. It means there's things to talk about, there's question marks around things, like that's all the stuff that I love. And I thought Insidious Chapter 2 did a great job of doing that. Not to mention fantastic cast. Lin Shaye is back, Wilson. This probably would have been, this and Hard Candy would have been the first places that I saw him in, like in the horror space. Rose Byrne, I think Rose Byrne came back for the second one too, right? Yeah, Rose
Oh
Byrne was
yeah,
in the first two. Yeah,
yeah.
just all around really great cast. And I even love the way they folded in some like random little stuff in the first one that was just scary that ended up paying off in the second one, like the spirit of the bride character. You know, like they had a guy play the character, but it was just because he was creepy looking, not because they necessarily had a backstory. And then they just created a backstory that fit with it, that made sense within the confines of the second narrative. So just, I don't know, just really inventive. It reminded me a lot of the way Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale went about that second Back to the Future, which is like, how can we stick even more things on this giant crazy machine we already created, you know?
I'm sure there are interviews where Lee Winnell and James Wan like talk about whether or not the first one was always meant to tie into like a future installment. But I tend to like not knowing just because it kind of leaves you open as a creative. You know, I think I'm actually hoping they didn't and they kind of just reverse engineered it. Obviously, we have experience reverse engineering like plots and scripts to build movies. Like we have X amount of props or X location and we build stories around it. So I think it's fun to think about it just from an ingenuity filmmaking standpoint. If they just took the stuff from the first film and started plotting backwards and being like, okay, this is how we tie it all in. And plus, like, just building the lore of the further in the second one, just I think they were trying to sort of obviously develop the franchise even more. Whether, regardless if they were going to be creatively in it or not, Winnell returned later, I think, as a writer, if not director. No, he wrote the one that Patrick Wilson directed, right?
Right. Well, and he also wrote he wrote the third one, but I think, or no, he directed the third one, but maybe didn't write it. I don't know. He's been involved in like four of them, I
Yeah.
think.
I mean, even as an actor, as Specs, he shows up
Oh, right.
often. But I know Juan has been a little bit more distant from it since he's directing fast movies and Aquaman and producing super blockbusters for Atomic Monster. But yeah, like chapter 2 just rips, compared to the other ones. Later on, the quality sort of dips. There just isn't the same oomph, especially when we turn away from Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne and their family. We revisit them again, but at that point, it sort of seems forced rather than like a natural development of like the franchise. But chapter 2 just sticks out as like just a really unique entry.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably right about them not being planned to, and I would say in keeping with the one that I referenced, which is Back to the Future 2, Back to the Future 2, there's no way they did that either. It was 5 years after the original when they did the sequel. I think it was like 1990 for a 1985 movie. So there's no way they did that with the intention of like, here are the 3 Easter eggs you need to know for if we're going to go back. And so I absolutely imagine they did what you're talking about there, which is they just mapped over and figured out what's the architecture of the second one based on what we know of the first one, as opposed to planning for it. But yeah, regardless, I just really enjoyed it, and I would love for more franchises of any kind, but especially horror movies, to take those kinds of big swings. But anyway, so that's my number 3 is Insidious Chapter 2, and now we move to your number 2.
So my number 2, is it my number 2? I'm so lost at this point. Yes, it is my number 2. My number 2 is The Invisible Man. So we are continuing with Lee Winnell. Apparently, I just love the guy. I really considered Upgrade as well for my top. I just think, just ingenuity-wise, filmmaking-wise, he really took it to the next level. So that's an honorable mention. But man, The Invisible Man works so well as kind of a sort of what you strive for. If all the movies nowadays are going to be sequels and reboots, I think you want to strive for the formula that he achieved for the reboot for Invisible Man. Like, you don't really think of the OG Invisible Man or even Hollow Man at that point as, just anything of heft. Like, it's almost just for fun. It's not, it doesn't carry any serious thematic weight to it the way that he kind of does it with this one, especially, in the age that he wrote it. It came out just pre-COVID, and he was sort of tapping into the trend of where things were going within society, where gaslighting was so prominent, on social media or just in relationships in general. And I think that got exasperated a little bit after COVID, where people were, locked in together. Maybe gaslighting became a little bit more prevalent because cabin fever started to hit, and it sort of seems like a movie of the times and also a movie that was ahead of its time at the same time. And just from a filmmaking standpoint, it was incredible because he uses empty frame a lot in this, like empty space. A lot of it's in wide shot, and we're sort of just scanning the scene. It's almost like a stage play in a lot of these wide shots where you're sort of looking and that there's a character that's invisible, so you're trying to see signs of where the character is, like what is going to happen to Elizabeth Moss's character, and it just ratchets up the tension a ton with the way that he photographs it.
Well, so something else that's interesting about this one, considering, because you just mentioned the original, the James Whale Invisible Man, and then Hollow Man by Paul Verhoeven, the things that are distinctive about those two movies are, you're correct, it's not like a super deep dive about character, but what they both are is a massive showcase for special effects extravaganzas. Same with Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I think in the past, most of Invisible Man movies have been about what new technology makes this a fun thing to do. Like, what new thing can we do that will make it astounding? In Whale's day, it was the composite backgrounds and like him having the actor wrapped entirely in black velvet and then taking and then obviously Verhoeven went like miles beyond that even. What I think is interesting about Lee Winnell's is this was a $5 million movie. He did not have the money to make a film that was going to be showcasing all of the most amazing things you could do right now in 2020 with visual effects. And so he did exactly what you're talking about, which is like make practical places terrifying because you can't see anything anything, not because you can, you know? And so he really leaned into sort of like old haunted house tricks, you know what I mean? Like the kind of stuff where it's about the way you frame something, or it's the close up on her face and then all you hear is a little bit of noise or the slightest sound of a breath or whatever. And then a lot of it was really just practical, you know? Like Elizabeth Moss was literally getting thrown around the kitchen in the scene where she's getting thrown around the kitchen. And for me, that was really clever because it put you in the shoes of the character experiencing it in a much less performative way than the other two movies were. The other movies were like show-offs, and this one was like, oh no, what if this was happening to you? And it was terrifying because you know something there is that you can't see, but no one else thinks there's anything there. So you're now crazy. And that is, for me, that was the sort of chef's kiss moment of discovery for that film.
And Elizabeth Moss just nails it, you know, like she's always walking that line of going maybe a 2 bit overboard, but that line that she walks kind of puts that unease in you, even though we're seeing what's happening to her, so we're not being gaslit that much, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like we're seeing objectively what's occurring to her, so we're always on her side. But sometimes her performance just gets so like manic that you can kind of also slip yourself into the other person's shoes and kind of see maybe she is lying, maybe she isn't, even though we know objectively what's going on with her.
Yeah.
Her
Well, it's that, what do they call
always
that?
is high octane.
Yeah, I think they call it the Cassandra syndrome, right? It's based on the Greek character of Cassandra, who is someone who knew what would happen in the future, but no one believed her, and therefore she was stuck with knowing what was going to happen and being able to do nothing about it. Like that's sort of where this character is throughout the whole film. Is she's been warning them about how bad he is, then she's been warning them that he's alive, then she's been, you know what I mean? And every step along the way, nobody believes her, and then the thing happens, but they think it's her and not someone else. And yeah, it's just really smartly constructed, simple, like building on top of each other until you get to the end and it's like you have no idea how you're going to extricate yourself from this, you know. It's really smart filmmaking.
Yeah, and just the plotting too, like they could have really just done it straightforward where her husband was actually the guy in this, spoiler alert, was actually the guy in the suit and not the guy's brother. So just adding that layer, like the familial layer, like going down, like it wasn't just the husband that was a D-bag, it was also his brother, and how sort of that kind of privilege and it just goes down the line in succession, just making it in a bigger scope. It's almost soap opera-ish with the levels of like the levels of thematic synergy throughout, which kind of appeals to me for a plot that's so sort of outlandish. Like your suspension of disbelief needs to, like, as soon as you turn the movie on or walk into the theater, you have to just shut your brain off a little bit because we're talking about someone who is literally invisible using technology that fully cloaks you. Like it's a bit fantastical, but it's so grounded because of the performances and like the underlying message of it all.
Yeah. Well, and the world feels contained too. It feels like a small story, so it never feels like an outlandish sci-fi narrative because you maybe only got 6 characters on screen for the most part. You maybe only got like 5 locations. Like it's a very small movie in that sense, and I think it was to its benefit. So anyway, so moving along to my number 2, which is another film that is similarly small in its scope. Actually, I don't need to build this up like it's a big surprise. You already named it earlier on in the list. This is the modern patron saint of horror film, Mike Flanagan's Hush. And since you were the one that introduced it first on the list, I'll let you dive in first, then I'll follow up. But why did you put it on your list?
Well, I am a sucker for films that take place mostly in quiet, like with no dialogue. For long stretches of this movie, there's just no dialogue, and it's just cat and mouse, full-on thriller. And the reason why it takes it over the top for me for this one specifically, because obviously you can make a whole podcast just on cat and mouse horror movies, is the way that they construct the tension through the perceived disabilities that she has in the film. You know, the sound design, for example, when the sound drops entirely or when the sound is completely amplified, like the alarm that flashes, like it's so gratingly loud in your ear, juxtaposed to like the complete dead silence when we're in her perspective. Just kind of the way that he manipulates that to ratchet up the tension that really took it over the top for me, and the performances were really good.
Yeah. So in particular, two people that I want to mention in this. Although there are several people in this movie: Michael Trucco from Battlestar Galactica, who pops up in his other stuff, and Samantha Sloyan, who was amazing later in Midnight Mass and several other things. But the two that I think are most interesting, I think John Gallagher as the bad guy is great. He is something of a dark horror. He's like kind of like a little bit of a Scream King. He's got some really interesting horror laurels. There's this one, 10 Cloverfield Lane. He was really good in. So, but the thing I liked about his performance was he played it in a way that wasn't exactly crazy. It was very interestingly calculating. When he realized who he was stalking and what the circumstances of her, like when he realized that she was deaf and he realized there was a whole other level of stuff that he could sort of torture and play with her about, I thought that was really, really compelling and interesting way to play this character in a different way that we've seen it a dozen times, where a masked dude is just chasing and terrorizing a woman. But then, of course, Kate Siegel's performance is phenomenal. I think this is the second time she worked with Flanagan, but her part in Ouija was, or not Ouija, Oculus was considerably smaller. This is sort of like her first, I think, lead role in his work, and they've worked in, I think, almost everything since, and obviously they're married. But I think this performance was great because it taps into what I think that you were talking about, which is she had a disability in the movie that ended up actually being a benefit to her in some capacity. And I thought that was, I like when a movie doesn't just take someone and put a disability to make the character more at threat. Like, it's not just, oh, look, yet another disadvantage for this poor person who's not even going to have the same skill sets as somebody else. In this movie, they found a way to actually make that her, to figure out how to weaponize that against the person that she's fighting. And I thought that was really, really clever on a script level, but also just on a performance level. I thought she did a really good job of not overplaying her hand, of like attempting to gain sympathy from the audience, which I think gives me more sympathy for a character because she's not reaching for it as an actress, you know? So yeah, I think this movie is great. It was one of those ones that disappeared for several years. It started on Netflix. Then I think you had to rent it from some places, and then it just literally was not streaming anywhere. And I think it had something to do with, he always wanted a physical release, and I think because it had been, I don't know, because of Netflix, they don't do physical releases, and it was about him wanting to get the rights back and not take it anywhere until he could get a physical release of it, which it now has, which is great. And yeah, I just think all around, again, one of those movies it's essentially all in a single location. It's got some fantastic tension set pieces. Yeah, I just like, he has done bigger movies, but I think this and Gerald's Game, I think, are some movies that have done a better job of showing the ability that he has to build character and scares in very small ways better than I think some of the people that have to work on this level all the time.
And it never wears out its welcome either.
Nope.
Like, I'm pretty sure it's like 84 minutes or something. And
Yeah. It's definitely a shark. It's constantly moving forward. There's no fat on it, you know.
Man, and I always like what you were saying, how she uses the disability to her advantage. Mm-hmm. I just love the final kill at the end where he's behind her and she feels it because her other senses are amplified because of her impairment, and she just slits his throat. That's awesome. Man. Fantastic performances all around. Definitely worth checking out. So that is why it ended up on both of our lists. I forget if it was your number 5 or number 4, but it is my number 2. So yeah, phenomenal movie. And it's the thing that probably one of the first Flanagans I saw. Like, I don't think I saw Oculus till after this. I definitely didn't see Absentia until after this. So this might have been my very first Flanagan, this or Ouija Origin of Evil. I'm not sure which. So the bar was set high.
Yeah, for sure. So, but anyway, so that was my number 2 is Hush, which I now believe brings us to your
number one. Number one. There was never a doubt what this number 1 would be. This is the only one on the list that you know about because I begged you to not take it, and I begged you to have it all for myself so I could talk about it because it's one of my favorite movies. It is, of course, Jordan Peele's Get Out.
Yep. And I can say right now, of course, it probably would have ended up on my list had you not begged for it. And I said, you know what? That's awesome, because it just leaves me another space to put on a thing on here that you definitely won't agree with.
There's 2 things I know about Chris. This would have been on his list, and Chris definitely would have voted Obama for a 3rd term if he could have.
If it's one thing you know about me, yeah, for sure.
No, Get Out is like, obviously, so many things have been said. It's been almost 10 years since it's been released, which is crazy to me, how quickly time flies, because I remember walking into that theater the night it came out in March, I believe, just a random day in March, and I went in by myself. I did not watch it with anybody. I was having dinner with friends before, and none of them wanted to watch it, but the movie theater was across the street, so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go in and watch it. I'm going to watch it anyways. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life because it was the best movie going experience I've ever had in my life. To this day, nothing has matched it. It was a full crowd. There was 300 people. It was the biggest auditorium at this Regal Cinema. And this was back when there wasn't assigned seating. So you sort of just had to pick your spot. And since I was running late to it, I was in the first section down there in the trenches where you have to look up like this just to see the screen. And I was off to the side a little bit, sitting by myself, but it did not feel like I was by myself. You know, like at every moment in this movie, this audience was laughing, screaming, hollering. It was like going to church, really. And it moved me in ways that I never thought were possible for a movie. It was sort of like the first time I watched 2001 or the first time I watched Magnolia. Like I felt something change within me. And I remember after, my friends didn't want to watch it then, but then it was a 1 month campaign of literally going to the theaters with each individual set of friends to go watch this movie because I felt like I needed to spread the good word of the gospel appeal. It's just incredible. I'm getting moved just thinking about it because this was at a time where, we it wasn't the COVID era yet. We were 3 years away from it, but there were still a lot of things in society, social injustices and such, where this movie really touched a lot on, and it kind of opened my eyes a bit more. I lived in my little safe bubble, but it kind of amplified that voice in me where that part at the end of the movie made me feel that way because that's how it is in real life and maybe that's not how it should be.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, I'll let you talk about it a bit more, but I do want to talk about that ending.
yeah, well, so without talking about the ending specifically, I want to talk about. I agree with you totally about basically about everything that you said about the movie. But the one thing that I take away more than almost anything else is I'm so glad that Peele won the best screenplay Oscar for this because he did something that feels impossible to be able to do, which is he made a movie that operates simultaneously on two separate levels. One of which, for you and me, is a film of illumination, right? It's a film that is showing us through storytelling, fear, empathy. It's showing us the experience that we have not had because I am not a black man or black woman. I've not walked through life, experienced the things that I'm witnessing in this movie. And it allows us to feel that for the first time. So it's illumination on one hand. And on the other hand, it is recognition for the audience that he made the film for, which is black audiences. And it's the same film playing, but it is two simultaneously completely different experiences because one is alarming and impactful for us to learn, and the other one is cathartic. Because it's like someone is finally seeing something portrayed on screen in the way that they've had to experience it in life and not felt like anyone has been honest about. So that balance, being able to capture both of those things in the same movie and both audiences walking away feeling fully satisfied that their discovery or their experience of it was so impactful, that feels impossible. That feels like you shouldn't be able to do it. And he did it. And he did it like, I don't want to say effortlessly. He obviously worked very hard on this movie, but it's so skillfully done that it took me several viewings before I realized that the movie's operating on two entirely different levels at the same time, and it's frankly sort of miraculous.
Yeah, the themes that it touches on are so hefty, but he does it with the featheriest of touches. Like it's so lightweight, it's so funny, it's so thrilling. Like it just keeps you engaged on a purely filmic level. It keeps you engaged. Like if you remove all the social critiques and the themes, just as a movie, it fucking rockets through. It's like 100 minutes long, and it never drags. It never gets boring. You're always invested in the mystery, in the horror, in the comedy, in the characters. But just the fact that you can also fold in all of that heady stuff into it, it just feels like one of those movies that makes you feel like you're never going to amount to anything because of the level of genius that is displayed. But yeah, I just want to tie that into the ending. And the ending, to me, is one of the best endings of any movie I've ever seen. I say that largely because of the experience in the theater. All of us are, gripping the armrests, hoping that he gets away. We're cheering for him, screaming at the screen. it was literal bedlam in the theater of people interacting and engaging with that movie. So when he basically incapacitates, I forget her name.
Allison Williams, the actress.
Yeah,
I don't remember the
Allison
character's
Williams'
name, but yeah.
character, when he incapacitates her, and we're like, he's finally done it, and the cop lights flash, the gasp and the energy suck, the vacuum out of the theater. I've never experienced anything like it. Like, I literally put my hands on my head like this. Everyone was sighing because we know what it means when cop lights flash and there is a black man in the middle of the road holding a weapon. We know what that means. You know, it usually means they're going to get shot right then and there. In the best case scenario, they're going to prison, you know.
Yep.
So the empathy that the entire audience shared in that moment, I don't think I'll ever experience it again in a theater. And then the relief it was when Lil Ray Howery comes out of the car as TSA, and just the cheering and the whooping and the screaming and the crying and every experience that we had once he exited the vehicle. And I mean, it really hits the same on second viewing, third viewing, fourth viewing. Karina hadn't watched it up until this year. So we had recently, Karina, my wife, we had recently rewatched it a few months back, and the ending is the same way. I mean, she was on the couch, she was like, no, and then TSA comes out, and she, you know, arms up, like, let's go. Like,
Yeah.
even
Well,
10 years after the fact, it's still moving people. It's just,
yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I think Peele has talked about how that was not what was originally going to happen. Originally, it was going to be the cops, and it was going to be a pretty dour ending. And there was something, I think, about at a certain point Peele realized, like maybe it was through audience testing, I don't know, or there was just a certain point where he realized that was a story for a different era. That was a story where the twist would work for the story, but maybe not for the world. I think is probably kind of where he came from, and so he had this ending. And honestly, thank God, because I feel like what that would have lost is what I was talking about. You know how I said there's the shock and awe for us who haven't experienced it? What would have been lost is the catharsis part. Like, the catharsis would have been lost if he had gone with that original ending. And so giving that new ending gave both, because we had the shock part, and then he added that bit that gave the catharsis. So in a way, like, that was him fulfilling the promise of everything else that happened within the movie. So yeah, man, fantastic film.
but I don't want all this talk on the theme and the script to overshadow, like, the filmmaking prowess.
Oh
that it
yeah,
actually
well,
has.
and again, another somewhat low budget film
Yeah.
to look as good as it does
It
too.
was like $1 million or $3 million, right?
Yeah,
And the opening itself with Lakeith Stanfield, it's basically just a oneer of him walking down the sidewalk,
Yep.
and then a car pulls up and it follows and it goes back, and it's well blocked,
Yep.
choreographed. The cinematography is amazing throughout. Great use of color. Great needle drop. The opening credit needle drop with
Run Rabbit. Yeah.
with Gambino. Incredible.
Oh,
Just-
sorry. I was thinking of Run Rabbit. I was thinking of the song that's playing in the car when he
Oh,
when
well, no,
looking
that one too.
Yeah.
When we get past that and we go to his apartment,
Yep.
where he drops Redbone by
Yeah.
Gambino.
Yeah.
Just-
And then obviously, not that he hadn't done anything before, but I think this was like a nuclear bomb as far as like awareness for Daniel Kaluuya, who, man, talk about carrying a movie on your shoulders, man. Holy shit. The movie doesn't work, arguably, without him at the center of this. A performance. I mean, could someone else have done it? Maybe, but like I can't fathom someone else being able to balance the complexity of the character, the masking that he has to do around certain characters and not around others. It's just, man, it's
They hit a
masterful
home run
stuff.
with him, man. Yeah.
That's a fantastic number one. So I guess I have to say my caveats in announcing my number one, because I think it's already going to be a big lift. I can't wait to see your reaction. But I have to say, obviously, it can't be Sinister and it can't be Get Out, because one was the joint number one and the other one was your number one. However, this is definitely more a personal choice for me, but I think I can argue and stand by why I chose this. Now, what I'm going to say about this movie is it is a sequel. It is a second film in I believe at this point, only a two film franchise. It is from one of my favorite subgenres of horror, which is a found footage style film. It is a film that you and I saw together in theaters, one of the only Blumhouse movies we saw together in theaters.
Okay.
And that film is Unfriended Dark Web. Now, I will give you all a second to gasp and then gather your things. Because here's what I want to say about Unfriended. First of all, I love a screen life movie. I love a found footage movie, period. But I love a screen life movie Because one of the things I love the most about Screen Life is that you're listening to us talk to you on a screen right now. Like, this is the way most people communicate nowadays. By and large, aside from family and close friends, everybody that you talk to is through some sort of a device. What's interesting to me about Screen Life movies is that they have adopted the language that we use to communicate with the majority of the world in their storytelling style. And I don't think, while there have been, a good handful, maybe two handfuls of Screen Life movies that people know of, like Searching and Missing and the other Unfriended. Unfriended Dark Web is the first one I've ever seen that feels like it took full advantage of all the different things that you can do with a Screen Life movie. Meaning, you're watching video in one portion, you're hearing audio from another portion, there's a chat box that's doing separate work over here, you have a character who speaks in sign language, and so only two of those characters can communicate, while others don't understand them because they don't speak it. The way that this movie plays around with multiple modes of communication happening simultaneously, the way that it divides up information on screen quadrants, so you are doing as much active work to understand what's happening as the main character is, and then also like a script that there's not an ounce of fat on this script. It's not a long movie, but everything that happens, stuff that just seems like interchanges between friends who are getting together for a game night, so much of that stuff comes back in very important ways for character revelations or story points. And I just think, like, this is, for me, one of the reasons I consider this the best of Blumhouse is because what Blumhouse is the best of low-budget horror when it's allowed to be left alone, given a little bit of money, but unfettered creativity. Like, we don't have a ton of cash for you, but if we give you this little bit of cash and you finish whatever movie you make, we're not going to meddle with it for the most part, This is what you have. If you can make it for $1 million, make whatever you're going to make, And arguably, from the list that we talked about, in 20 years, having 10 films that we would consider to be like superb high-quality films, that's pretty impressive. Like, some studios don't even have that track record, And so that, to me, the reason this one ranked so high is just because it does all of the things that I think are emblematic of what can make a place like Blumhouse work so effectively. So go ahead. You can go ahead and complain about how this made it to number one, but I just thought it's sort of just the perfect encapsulation for me.
I was going to have this in here to replace one of these. Like, I was seriously considering this one, but I sort of felt that you were going to do it because you're such a found footage freak and Screen Life freak. But yeah, you're right. We watched this in theater in 2018. I think Josh was with us too, our other coworker at the time.
Yep.
And I'm a horror hound. You're a horror hound. Josh, not so much, but he went and saw it anyways, and he really liked it, which kind of shows you kind of the universal way that Blumhouse movies, and that one in particular, capture people, even people who aren't particularly horror buffs. This movie rips. Like, it is genuinely, like, first of all, it's engaging. Like you were saying, you're scanning every part of the screen, just trying to piece together, the mystery around it all. And then two, it's scary as shit. Like, it's pretty horrifying for a movie that, you're basically just relying on a POV footage from like a live stream or a video clip that you've clicked on, or like a few static shots from like security cameras. There you don't have the luxury of sort of moving the camera wherever you need, the way that, The Shining or The Exorcist could use to create their scares. So it's kind of impressive that this movie scared me as much as it did, and engaged me as much as it did. Even with there's you can ask me, hey, who's in the movie? I couldn't tell you. It's 20 something, like 520 somethings that I've not heard of since. I don't think. I mean,
yeah. Well, not to interrupt you, but I was just going to tell you, this might blow your mind. Betty Gabriel from Get Out is in this movie. The one that played the housemaid, she's in this movie.
Go figure.
Yeah, she's been in like 5 of them. I think she was in one of the Purge movies. She's been in a bunch of stuff from Blumhouse. But no, I agree with you. One of the things that they actually do very well, aside from the few that we've talked about, where like Patrick Wilson or what's I was saying from Sinister, Ethan Hawke.
Oh yeah,
they do a really good job of finding super talented actors who are like, well, nobody really knew Kaluuya in the States before Get Out came out, so they're really good at finding faces that, like, this is a kind of a lost art nowadays. Everybody wants to cast stars in their movies so that the movies make money. But there used to be, you had to make stars, like we've run out of them because we're not making them anymore. But I think Blumhouse has done a fairly good job of making movies where people start to build up interesting reputations. Arguably, Patrick Wilson kind of made his career in really good horror films, starting with small ones and then working his way up, and eventually The Conjuring became one of the biggest franchises. I think last year's biggest opening, wasn't it? Something like that? Yeah, and doing it off of like people. I'm not saying Patrick Wilson had never made anything, but he was not a known commodity to the degree that he is now because of the reception from his horror movies. I also will say the other thing I love about that I think most people don't even know about Unfriended Dark Web is that it is the only other film that I did a bit of research and couldn't find any other film except for Clue that did this, which is when it was released theatrically, Unfriended Dark Web had a different ending depending on what theater you saw it in. Because I was talking to somebody about the ending and what they thought of it, and they told me the ending that they saw, and it was different than the one that you and I saw in theaters. And so I looked it up, and I was like, yeah, for sure, there's at least two. There might be three, but there's definitely two different endings. And they didn't even announce it. You know, like in Clue, they were like, well, it could have ended this way. Or like in this case, they didn't tell anybody. You just got a different experience in the movie depending on where you saw it. That's wild, you know?
Yeah. I'm curious what you think about the fact that this one hasn't gotten the franchise love of some of the other ones. Is it strictly box office, or is it just the how much can you wear out this Screen Life gimmick on one property?
I don't know. It's a good question because, so here's what I think. I think, first of all, it was produced by Timur Bekmambetov, who had made Wanted and several other films. And then he has since gone full bore into Screen Life stuff. Like that's his new interest. In fact, I believe he was also the producer on Missing and what was the other one we were just talking about?
I think.
What's that? Searching, yeah. Missing, Searching, Bloat, Resurrection. Basically any Screen Life movie that you can think of that is not like super, super low budget indie, he probably had a hand in some capacity. There's a one called Profile, and he worked on all of those. My suspicion is they made a second Unfriended because the first one did fairly well, especially for the budget that these operate on. But I think it was possible that he was just like, I want to try this in a bunch of different other capacities. Like, I don't want to just have it be this thing, you know? In the same way that I think for a long time, people thought of all found footage movies as Blair Witch Project after that came out, or all films as Paranormal Activity after that came out. I think he didn't want Screen Life to just be synonymous with the Unfriended franchise, and so he branched out. But I mean, I don't know. It could also be that like it's hard to recapture lightning in a bottle. There was two different directors on both of the Unfriended films. No characters continued between the two. The first one was supernatural. The second one was decidedly not supernatural. And so really the only thing they had in common was it was like bad stuff happening on a laptop. You know what I mean? On a shared experience on a laptop. And so it occurs to me that like, well, theoretically, a bunch of his other movies could be another Unfriended. You know what I'm saying? Like. Yeah. They're all technically Unfriended. They just didn't call it that for the franchise's reason. So I don't know. Does Blumhouse still own it? Are they looking for someone, say like a writer, director, actor duo that might be on this very call to make another one? And if so, we're ready to do it. But no, I don't know why. And I think my hope is that someday it will get the critical reappraisal that I think it deserves. I think the problem was that it came out at a time where the format was still a gimmick. And so I don't think it got the credit for being just a good story because people were paying attention to the showier parts of like, look how new and unique and interesting this is, you know? I don't know. That's my theory.
I am hoping that we get hired and do the sequel, and if not us, then somebody else, because I sort of need more of it. Like, it was before I really enjoyed found footage the way that I do now, after you opened the floodgates for me not too long ago. So when I went and watched it, I was just like, it's just something to do on a Saturday or whenever we watched it. And then I left and I'm like, wow, this is actually pretty good, all things considered, because, you know, I'm a film nut. Like, I love me some cinematography and some juicy lighting and just great production design. So those movies, before my eyes opened up to found footage, I wasn't interested in it because it felt like you were putting yourself in a box. And then I came to realize that being in the box is part of the fun in these movies. Like,
yep.
You're finding new ways to tell stories in these tight, constrained windows, and literally windows in this case. And yeah, dude, blew my socks off.
It's awesome. Well, so that is our top 5. The only thing, and I didn't mention this to you, so if you don't have any, that's fine. But I was trying to think if there were any, like, is there anything that almost made but didn't quite make the cut? There was only one for me that just barely got edged out just because I thought I wanted to talk about The Hunt because I felt like it had gotten, you know, unfair short shrift. But this one, because it's beloved, because it has a sequel, and because it actually has a spin-off series, I was like, I think it'll survive without my endorsement. But the very first Creep film from Mark Duplass and Patrick Brice was in and almost on the list. It's a phenomenal movie, great performance. Essentially a two-hander, but you really only see one of the hands for the most of the movie. And like, it's a movie that just simply does not work without the presence of Mark Duplass as both the writer and the performer. But another one that, like I said, just barely missed the cut.
Yeah, I was gonna actually put Creep 2 on here. I was debating on Creep 2 for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really miss with Duplass.
Yeah. In fact, for, we should say not only Creep 1 and Creep 2, but if you have Shudder, I think season 3 of Creep Tapes is getting ready to come out in September, and there's already 2 seasons. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It's just such a perfectly captured character, and it's really fun to watch someone who is enjoying the ability to make people uncomfortable because of his total dismissal of social niceties. I think that's such a fascinating hook to play for a character.
Yeah, dude.
But-
I mean, and if anyone knows how to play that, it's Duplass. Like,
Yeah.
he always operates on this really empathetic level. Like, you want to like him, but then he has this mean streak about him in some of the things that he does, where you're just like, sorry, like maybe I didn't know you.
Yeah, for sure. So were there any that like almost missed for you? Was it just Creep 2 was the one?
I think it was Creep 2, and then we talked a few about some of my near misses were on your list. So.
Right. That's right. So awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. If you haven't seen any of these movies, and I was going to say 10, but actually I had 2 that were on your list. So technically it's closer to like 9 with the bonus number 1. But I don't know if you have your list there, but just to reiterate, my top 5 were: number 5 was The Hunt. Number 4 was Paranormal Activity 3. Number 3 was Insidious Chapter 2. Number 2 was Hush. And number 1 was Unfriended Dark Web.
Yeah. And mine was number 5 was Insidious Chapter 2. I think my number 4 was Hush. My number 3 was Obsession. Number 2 was Invisible Man, and number 1, Get Out.
So go watch Creep, and thank you for watching this.
Thanks for having me.